All right, here's a quick video we put together for talking about secure communications for human rights defenders and NGOs. Basically, we'll be covering some important topics here: have a policy, have a plan, choose the right tool for the right job, and protecting your communications platform. So openness is kind of a virtue that HRDs and NGOs have among their kind of internal team members and the partners that they work with. And openness is great, but it's also important to respect boundaries and to have boundaries and have people respect those and kind of have that sense of kind of seriousness with what's going on within the organization and why that respect is important. Uh, Establishing that kind of appropriate boundaries between individuals in the organization, we can use something called the principle of least privilege. And that's that a user or entity should only have access to the specific data, resources, and applications needed to complete a required task. Another thing we can do is have compartmentalization, where we assure that information can only exist within certain subsets of an organization. And it's kind of a nice thing if you in sense of kind of that sharing idea that HRDs and NGOs want to have among their internal group, to kind of allow people into the inner circle progressively, so you can kind of give someone a sense of being promoted or having increased access and kind of increased responsibility. There's a benefit there, and that can only start if in the beginning that type of segmentation and compartmentalization is there to begin with. So most importantly, beyond even choosing which platform you're going to use, is having a plan and a policy. So speaking about the policy, kind of limiting the scope of information to certain groups within the organization, where identifying where data is allowed to live, and that data being the PI or sorry, IP, the intellectual property of the organization, which tends to come out in communications. So we talked about that. Next is to have a plan. So be able have a strong idea about what you need to do to bring someone into your communications ecosystem, and then how to take them out of it. Make that very clear. It's nice to have even a checklist for both of those. And then then also to cover how do you deal with external communications, because communications is not like plugging two systems together and then indicating what data type is allowed or not. It has a lot to do with relationships between people. How do you kind of bring people into that conversation about using secure communications? That's an important part. And then disaster recovery, planning for a situation where your communication ecosystem is compromised, someone has left it on bad terms, or someone has been discovered to be within it with malicious intent. So onboarding, have a checklist. Start with that principle of least privilege. Give people as little access as they need in the beginning, and then give more access progressively as time goes on. Offboarding, similarly, have a checklist, and it's good to have just that checklist for when people leave under normal circumstances. But when people leave under kind of difficult circumstances, you need to have some kind of what we'll talk about next is kind of a disaster recovery plan. So for external communications, this is where any type of communication policy for these types of communications breaks down, because we want to acquiesce to people, we want to kind of give them a sense of closeness, that type of thing. And we often forget that we even have this communication policy, because in day-to-day operations it sounds like an afterthought. Although when disaster strikes, it becomes very important, and it's good to keep some respect for this concept of communication security as just operating normally. So for external communications, we obviously can't be weird and say, oh, we only speak on secure networks. Don't text me, don't email me. So have some concept of progressive kind of bringing people into your communications ecosystem. So your introductions can be platform agnostic, kind of meet people on whatever terms they have, but then tell them, we have a security policy after having a consultant speak to us and having heard about some stories in the field about issues with privacy and that type of thing. You can have a story there, uh, and they will be well understood because nowadays privacy and security are commonplace concerns. Everyone is seeing the same security awareness training at their work. A lot of these topics are becoming more and more mainstream, so you don't have to feel like bringing up the topic of privacy and security is going to be something uh, taboo or make you look like a weirdo. Uh, and in the end, you can always just blame your security team for any type of communications weirdness, and that should be all right. So, disaster recovery. Again, have a checklist, and this is going to be based on tabletop exercises and war games, what this checklist looks like as you kind of work back from there. So, we'll talk about that. Have a disaster recovery plan for the most likely scenario. So, whether that's a breach from an external entity or an insider or whatever it might be as it relates to the loss of privacy for certain materials or an unwanted level of access for someone that is against your mission. So plan out what that scenario looks like in the most likely case, and then also what the most dangerous scenario would be. And it's good, and it shouldn't take too much time. It could be something like a 15-minute exercise, maybe 30 minutes, to think through, okay, what would happen if this happened? Let's say whatever that thing is that comes to mind. Okay, what's the next step? What comes after that, and what comes after that? And then work backward and establish a protocol that would basically eliminate the risks that come about from that particular scenario. And so that's the benefit of having the tabletop exercises and war games, and then developing the checklist of operations to follow should that scenario take place. It's very simple, and it's just like putting on a seatbelt in your car. It only works if you do it before the accident. And, you know, you want to get from A to B, I get it, but you want to get there safely. So these things are well worth the time that you spend. If you don't do it in the beginning, you're going to end up doing it afterwards, and it's going to be a lot more difficult and less effective. Okay, so then choosing the right tool for the right job. This comes about after you create your policy and your plan, evaluating your threat actors, and then the assets that you mean to protect via your communication plan. So that will basically lead to the selection of your communication platforms. So considering your threat actors, think about who might target you. For NGOs and HRDs, it's an interesting space where basically there is a threat from nation-state actors, which is not all too common for other markets or kind of businesses. So there's always that possibility, but that might not be your top threat. So consider who might target you. Is it a malicious insider? Is it a nation state? Is it a criminal organization? Is it an opportunistic hacker? And understand what are their capabilities. That's something for another video, but that's kind of where we would start. Then look at the assets that you need to protect. What is the information being passed around on these communication networks? Is a certain type of communication on one platform more sensitive than the communications on another? So then those two platforms need to have different levels of security? Consider the human factors and social norms. You're not going to get all of your external partners and even some of your internal ones to switch over to a really restrictive platform. And we'll talk about those at the end of this presentation. And you'll have to have that communication and data policy in place to kind of protect through procedures the information that you're passing around. And then keep in mind, regardless of the tool that you end up using, which is typically software that runs on a device with a password, you're going to want to make sure that you have account security in place, the use of password managers and protecting your secrets. You're going to make sure that you're going to want to have software security, meaning updating the software on your device so that you're not open to vulnerabilities that could lead to the compromise of your device. And device security, knowing where your device is, not allowing access to those devices that's unwanted. So those security basics are going to protect your communications beyond just the platform that you choose. Uh, so the right tools for the right jobs. Many organizations will use the the kind of category of tools listed here, and we're just going to cover some options for each of them. So for email, unless you're concerned with nation states, any option is a good one. So Outlook, Gmail, Proton are listed here. Uh, Basically, if there's any concern about nation state interest in communications, then you need to start thinking about encryption. Proton is maybe the beginning of that. There are other platforms that allow you to manage the encryption of your email communications, but they're rather difficult to use for most people. Proton offers encryption in a way that's kind of transparent. All of these platforms will have your communications moving about on the internet, on the public internet, encrypted, and it's not easy to de-encrypt those messages or to read them while in transit. The real risk comes from someone gaining access to an inbox, and so uh, that's a really juicy target because many people have banking information, all of their life taking place within their email inbox, and so if if someone's email account is basically where they put all of their information regarding work, uh, personal finances, etc., those are very juicy targets and can be maybe something to think about in terms of like segmenting accounts or something like that. But any of these are good options. Um, SMS. So both Android and Apple offer end-to-end encryption. End-to-end encryption being the gold standard for encryption for communication security nowadays. Meaning, when someone sends a message from one device, the only other person that can read that information is the other device, the recipient device, and no one within uh, in transit of that message is able to read it. So there's no server that decrypts the message and then sends it to the other device. It's encrypted on one, it's decrypted on the other. Those are the only two people that can read the message. Although both of these do offer end-to-end encryption, they don't offer it cross-platform. So if you're an Apple user talking to an Android user, the chat is not encrypted. Uh, in Android, I believe you have to turn on encryption. So if you don't turn it on, even your communication by default is not encrypted. So because of the kind of irregularity here and the lack of consistency, I would shy away from having any type of sensitive communication via SMS. Not only that, but there are some basically when you send an SMS message, you're trusting the telecom network as if you would be trusting, say, like a public Wi-Fi. But in this case, the so-called public Wi-Fi is owned by the government or companies that are very close to the government. And so just like you wouldn't want to connect to the internet in your friend's house where you know their like kid is a kind of malicious hacker or something like that, you similarly don't want to connect to networks that are controlled by people that have organizations with very powerful hacking capabilities. So I would stay away from SMS, except for those cases where we talked about for introductory conversations. But I would move off of these platforms as soon as possible. Um, and move on to one of these. So messaging. Messaging apps are incredibly popular right now, and there's very little weirdness with many of them, and with a few in particular that are very good. Some messaging platforms that are very privacy oriented or that start with privacy first don't gain a lot of market share and a lot of kind of not a lot of users, and it's very difficult to get your friends and coworkers and uh, uh, business contacts to switch over to these platforms. What I mean by that is something like Signal or Wickr. Uh, sorry, not Signal, Session or Wickr, that green S and then the AWS logo on the right. Those are privacy first platforms, but very few people use them in certain contexts, in most contexts. And then, so basically, so we have on the left we have WhatsApp, which has end-to-end encryption, um, but they're owned by a corporate entity that might have interest in collecting your data, um, and kind of be rather loose with that. But in this case, they would just have access to the metadata. But it is end-to-end encrypted. This is a platform that's popular all around the world. So the privacy of the message is going to be there. It's just the who is contacting who and when is going to be something that's going to be known to the corporate entity and possibly sold to data brokers. With Signal, the metadata is there as well. Although you could start a Signal account with one device and then use it on another. And Signal will give metadata to law enforcement agencies. But if you're not concerned about nation-state actors, then there's the communication is end-to-end encrypted. It has a great feature of this kind of exploding message where basically you can set a timer for when you want messages to be deleted. So that's a great offer. And the really big plus here is that Signal is very widely adopted in the consumer space. So it's not a difficult conversation to get someone to switch, and the sharing capability, how to get someone onto Signal, is a really nice streamlined process that's rather pain-free. So basically the Telegram here on the next icon, this is a platform that's a lot like Signal in that it's kind of this independent organization that offers end-to-end encryption. End-to-end encryption is not on by default, but when it's on, it's good. That adds complexity for like non-technical users and kind of leads to less reliability. I will say this though, for some human rights defenders or NGOs that are working in a space where their interests might be against or might be perceived to be against a government that's kind of friendly with the US, it would probably be better to go with Telegram because it would be more difficult for law enforcement to get a request through to access the records in Telegram than it would be for, say, Signal or WhatsApp. But yeah, still in my mind, Signal is better provided you don't have that nation state consideration. Session, the next one, this is a privacy first platform, which it's built off of a blockchain. They thought about privacy from the start, and it's a really great option, but it's not widely adopted. So if you want secure communications among like a close circle, maybe that's a good choice, but not for a broader context. Slack is very convenient. They don't have a strong privacy policy or security is there. Your messages won't be stolen in transit, but the privacy piece, not a lot going on there. In fact, when they turned on the kind of AI to collect data within their platform in order to train a model, they did it without informing anybody, and it was an opt-out policy. They really don't care about end user privacy. That being said, they're not gonna, sell away your secrets or anything like that. It's just if you're concerned about kind of just having your data leaked to or data sold off to secondary to data brokers, this is an organization that's going to be doing things like that. And then AWS Wicker is a platform that's a lot like Slack, but it's privacy first, and it's trusted by organizations like the U.S. government as a kind of collaboration tool. It kind of has the same look and feel as Slack. It just has that security first focus, and privacy is going to be a bit better there. For group chats, so you have Teams, Slack. Wire is another platform similar to being a privacy-oriented company like Wicker, which was purchased by AWS. But Wire is a Swiss company, and their whole concept is security, privacy first, trusted by the U.S. Air Force, and it's a really great platform. The only thing is that some of the usability is a bit off. It's not what you would expect because it's different than some of the more common platforms out there. But in terms of privacy and security, I would say that's probably the best one for group chat. Video calls, lots of options here. No risk of having your communications stolen kind of in flight. as long as you have policies around who can access your meetings by invite or by having kind of to accept members as they join the meetings, that type of thing. But all of these are good options. Obviously, the big corporate players are going to be selling data that they can that they collect based on what you're doing in those chats. And there's not a lot of transparency there, so it's not sure like what type of information they're using. But Wire has a video conferencing option as well, part of their package, and it's a good one. Slack and Wicker, they also have kind of that huddle concept where you can do video calls. But in terms of privacy, all the corporate players from left to right, except for Wire and Wicker, are going to be selling your data, but they're going to be securing it while it's in transit. So that's pretty much it. I hope that helps answer some questions. And yeah, thanks for listening.